Okay, hello everybody. I'm very excited about book club. I think this is month 5 or 6, and I've got no notes on Vertigo. I wrote nothing down, and I just finished it uh, while we were streaming, like 2 minutes ago. I had read the first maybe 125 pages, or no, 160 or so pages uh, over the first like 3 weeks of this month. And then last night, I just read until I fell asleep and woke up this morning and read until I finished. So I'm like just fresh off the having finished the book in kind of like sprint to finish it, which is such a good way to read this very dream-like and precise and mystifying book. Um, yeah, I'll just kind of speak briefly about my experience reading it, and then I would like to essentially just rely on all of y'all to maybe unpack and think about some of the things that I find really interesting in Vertigo and in Sebald in general, because now I've read Austerlitz, which I really, really loved, and I think was maybe his last novel, and Vertigo, which is his first, and then what's this other one called? On the Natural History of Destruction, which was like incredibly brutal um, essay. Um, anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the themes in Vertigo are highly similar to those in Austerlitz, and I feel like I had two different windows into those themes, but they're very subtle and kind of open questions and investigations that I don't, you know, um, what am I trying to say? This is a thematically driven book. It's not a plot driven book, not necessarily a language driven book. And I love that because Asa and I were talking a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week or so ago, about a story he had written, and and about just like fiction and stories in general, and that um, you know there's an opportunity in the construction and like the workings of stories to have this underlying logic that's guiding what's on the page, and it isn't necessarily apparent to the reader what the underlying logic of the story is. And in Vertigo, this is a thematic logic, a thematic like engine driving the story. But it dictates all of the decisions that the writer makes. And so my feeling of reading Vertigo was that um, to greater and lesser degree throughout the book, it wasn't a perfect book to me, but most definitely the beginning, the part of shoot, who's the guy's name? The Napoleonic. Um, anyway, the first essay was excellent to me, and the very last section was also very excellent to me. These two parts of the book in general, dictated by this underlying thematic logic, which I'm sure we all know has to deal with history, memory, and to me, most precisely deals with the way that like history, the past, ekes into the present moment and all the different ways that it can. The most kind of like exciting example of this exists both in Vertigo and in Austerlitz, in which a physical space is preserved in time and the narrator, after much sort of like contextualizing, goes into this space in the present moment, but which is preserved to hold like the essence of a time of the past. In Austerlitz, the narrator and this person that he's traveling with are they go into this French mansion, a villa that is being used for like storing, I believe, like potatoes or like some sort of farm product. But in the upstairs, there's this kind of secret room that was a billiards hall, and when they enter it, the narrator realizes that they're entering this room for the first time since the 19th century, and that like on the billiard table are still staged the balls and the the billiard stick or whatever as it was exactly in 1830 something. Those moments of like, the history and the past having this resonance in the narrator's presence, psyche, exists too in Vertigo when he goes up into the attic and finds I can't remember the name. My recollection of this book may not be as precise as usual because I didn't really write any notes. I just kind of went for it. But he goes up to the attic. He touches the soldier's uniform, and it just disintegrates before him. These kind of images and situations are like rife throughout this book, and to me are the most exciting, subtle. There's like no way to explain or get at what Sebald is doing in these moments, in sort of, what do you call it, in just pure like description. Like they have to exist in narrative and story, and in these sort of like metaphorical terms, in the ways that he's trying to describe history and memory and the past. Anyway, that's my take on the book. It's very messy. I just kind of read it, and had my own experience with it and didn't really think too much about what the book was trying to do. So hopefully we can unpack together, and share what we experienced in our own readings. But so Jess said she read it a few months ago, and so hopefully remembers most of it. Connor said, a little different for me this time. I read it a few months ago, and I wasn't too crazy about it, so I'm excited to hear your thoughts and possibly reread. Naxus Stendhal was the person in the Napoleonic section, the first. Okay, well, for the record, I was pretty crazy about it, Jess said. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear, Jess, what your experience. Actually, if everyone wants to put in what their experience of reading the book was, what they kind of felt about what was driving the book forward, potentially this like memory, history, the past, the narrator's kind of like there's like paper thin psyche where the information, and the historiographical accounts that he's reading and taking in, all of these newspapers are kind of bleeding in with his present situation, his forays, his travels. Yeah, I guess, what was your experience of reading the book? What what to you was the underlying, what was the thematic engine of this book? What drove it forward for you? And I guess what'd you think of it? Just let us know in the chat, and we can kind of start to unpack it, tear it apart a little bit more. Yeah, did you like the book? Parts that were more challenging for you or didn't really enjoy? I'm interested, like, Connor wasn't so crazy about it. Why is that? Jess really liked it. Asa's in here, and Knack, also read the book, and so yeah, I want to hear your kind of take, your experience of reading. And in the meantime, I'll drink some tea and then talk some more about some of my thoughts. So Jess pointed out on page 8, um, this passage. This being so, Bale's advice not to purchase engravings of fine views and prospects seen on one's travels, since before very long they'll displace our memories completely. Indeed, one might say they destroy them. Um, Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's constantly what the narrator is doing. Maybe not, purchasing engravings um, of the things seen on on one's travels, but constantly reading historical newspapers and finding these mementos to then place in the narrative. Um, and this like altering, destroying of memory, that's happening informs the whole book. I think it's what what the narrative is getting at and trying to show is just how history and memory is altering the present. Um, I will say I don't know, my experience at first, once we left Bale, that section, the first 30 pages, were stunning and brilliant to me. And then the next um, part, when he goes to Italy for the first time, and it's, Sebald essentially as himself narrating his like auto-fictional account. When we go into the first person narrative, I was kind of less drawn in by that part and maybe by that section as a whole, although it was totally necessary for the rest of the book. I feel like Sebald is at the like peak of his powers. Maybe this is just my feeling, and I don't even know how much of it I really believe, but in a third person sort of like more essayistic account, I feel like Sebald is just like unbelievably good. Um, but when I felt that he was just like, life writing and writing about himself, especially in that second chapter, um, I was less taken by it. And then just experientially, like the very last chapter, when it was all about him and his childhood, and he returned to W, which was the place that he had grown up, I was totally like taken by that place. And then like this nostalgia, dark and psychologically, yeah, almost like paranoia inducing, vertigo inducing trip back into the past was like totally perfect for me too. So I can't say it's just his autobiographical writing that I didn't like. There was something in that second chapter when he first went to Italy. I think maybe because some of the like oppressed feelings, the like mentally and psychologically oppressed feelings that the narrator slash Sebald was going through in that section, I guess I just didn't buy as much, especially as like an engine to move the narrative along. I was kind of like, come on, dude. You know, the solo, weary, and like fraught European male traveler. I don't know. You know, it's just kind of like, all right, this isn't what's moving the book forward for me. It's everything else. But I do get why that had to be established to yeah, it's a frail psyche that this narrator has, and that allows some of the um, even the sort of some like very small surreal parts and the dream-like aspects of the book, even though it's very precise, that allows some of those to exist. So I get it, but I think maybe that second chapter had to do a lot of like formal work to allow the rest of the book to be impactful for me. But nevertheless, okay, let's get to y'all's comments, which I'm most interested in. Asa, I was consistently struck by the specificity of the details, how quotidian is objects of attention. It felt like an act of devotion to the act of remembering. I'm really loving. I have 50 pages left. Yeah. That's part of why I really admire Sebald. I think as a writer, you know, you always hear like, yeah, specificity gives this like veracity to a story, to a narrative, but that's beyond what even Sebald is doing. Specificity and these details that he's paying attention to, you get the sense that there is no other way that Sebald functions. You know, reading these old newspapers and focusing on I don't know, it's just like, it's not a narrative choice. It's not a choice at all. It's just, it seems like fundamental to Sebald. I get the sense as a person, not even just as a writer in these narratives, that he has this like inscrutable attention to very minute details, and then the magic and the I guess the magic, you could call it, is that he then figures out a way to make that necessary for the narrative, and without getting like bogged down or feeling like this is a kind of ploy. He makes those details the point and the force of the book, of all of his books, and that is a superpower. You know, that's Sebald's superpower. Connor says, I'd say memory and recollection felt like the driving force. I think my non-enjoyment was due to the lack of experience in the genre, just an overall challenging read for me at that specific time. Jess, I read this book when that silly Bob Dylan movie came out, and I had a mini crisis about these biopics dumbing down and changing the way we perceive historical events, contemporary engravings. Yeah. Knack, I liked imagining myself into the sceneries he built with his words. They were so captivating. Yeah, I think he has this pictographical kind of way of writing, that very precise and stylistic, also like journalistic, nonfiction feeling. And yeah, it's very exciting to me. I think, you know, what Connor was saying about this genre, part of me felt that like, and I don't think this is hot take in any way, but Sebald is kind of inventing his own genre here. It's like much more than Austerlitz, which I highly recommend reading. I feel like I don't think that's maybe his most popular or like well received book, but to me, it feels like the writer fully realized. And, as a digression, he seemingly only has one theme in the same way that like V.S. Naipaul has one theme in all of his books that he's just, exploring through all these different facets. Sebald essentially has this one theme: memory, history, the past, and how it interacts with our present. That's kind of a dumbed down way of getting at what he's getting at, which obviously he cannot. It's like this insatiable thing that he has to explore. Naipaul has that same theme through all of his books. I really admire that too. Like there's some inexplicable feeling and idea and question that these writers are just, they have to ask over and over and over and over again. And it's this like inexhaustible source of inspiration. Anyway, I lost track of what I was saying about Austerlitz and Vertigo. So that's my digression. Sebald has one essential theme. Now I remember the genre. While not unique, I think of this like, I would call it an essay, like a narrative essay that has definitely historical precedent. But you do get the sense that like, especially with the photographs that Sebald is using, which I think he gets better at in his later work in Austerlitz, they felt more. In Austerlitz, I felt like the photographs and the words that followed and came out of them drove kind of the whole book. Like you get the sense that he's looking at these photographs, writing in and around them, and that's what's like kind of dictating his whole writing process. In Vertigo, sometimes it felt like the photographs were just proof that this was an actual experience at times, and not in a bad way. I thought, that's also just an aside. However, Sebald is creating this kind of life writing genre in this book that is highly fictional, highly narrative. It can contain these, like, as he was talking about the past as well, having these elements of the absurd or unbelievable. Also, it kind of at times moves so quickly through these specific moments and memories that you're not sure what really happened. It feels like at once, in turns, a nonfiction account, journalism almost, and like deeply fictional, deeply novelistic and inventive, formally, in a way that I think is, in Vertigo, he was clearly like charting this new territory, and that was like one of the main focuses of the book. Where I feel like, Austerlitz is my other exposure to Sebald. He was just very confident and a master of this genre, of this way he had created. Let's see. So yeah, Connor, I'm drinking. I'm embarrassed, but I really like pu'er tea. It's this Chinese fermented kind of like black tea. I love it. Drink it every day, most of the time, almost every writing day. Love it. And okay, so maybe let's talk. Maybe we can try to. I would like to, with the help of everyone, Asa, Knack, Connor, Jess, um, can we get any further into this, into what Sebald is doing um, with this theme of memory, history, of these like what Jess was talking about, how maybe a less effective or a like a kind of silly approach, this like Bob Dylan biopic, dumbing down, changing the way we perceive historical events, I feel like obviously is the antithesis to what Sebald was trying to do um, in the way we perceive history, in the way, um, his theme of the past is working. Can we get any further into exploring what the hell he was trying to do? you know, I'd like to say, well, let me go through. I have some notes in the book, and I feel like I maybe we can break open his theme and explore it a little bit more. Um, I did have a comment on page 49 um, in this second section. The train journey from Vienna to Venice has left scarcely any trace in my memory. For what may have been an hour, I watched the lights. Um, and my notes here is that everything is very light and very scarce. Even these like the dark and gruesome things that he depicts are handled just very, they're like, have the weight of a feather. I think in lesser narratives, lesser um, writers, sometimes, you feel this like immense, this like gravity, especially towards like the dark and the gruesome and these sort of things. And especially in like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like I'm imagining like workshop stories and stuff where like everything feels so like the writer's trying to like extract the gravity from every single sentence, and it's like, come on. Sebald's trying to do the opposite. He's trying to like just just touch even the darkest subjects with this scarce um, this lightness. And I also think that helps too in the fact that you're in this kind of like the psyche of this narrator, in which the past and the present experiences are intertwined. Anyway, let's see what else. What other notes that can help us? Like unpack this theme. This is just an example of what Asa was talking about, that the narrator has these extraordinary powers of attention. On page 51, when I'll just read this sentence. The low-lying cloud drifting in from the alpine valleys and across the desolated country was conjoined in my mind's eye with a Tiepolo painting, which I've often looked at for hours. It shows the plague-ravaged town of the Este on the plain, seemingly unscathed. In the background are mountains and a smoking summit. The light diffused through the picture seems to have been painted as if through a veil of ash. One could almost suppose it was this light that drove the people out of the town and into the open fields, where, after reeling about for some time, they were finally laid low by the scourge they carried within them. And then he goes on to describe this painting. Yeah, these powers of attention, and then like imaginative. He often will like start with a very vivid, detailed description of a painting, of a memory, of a building, and then the imagination within that takes hold and he's like fictionalizing some scene or some idea or some thought, that that uh, that 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 whatever his attention is on is generating. Just really good. It's just like really good, really good writing. Works perfectly in this narrative. Um, oh, one more thing too. I wanted to mention. I really think too, in the same way that like entering a physical space that's been preserved by history, um, Sebald also has these few moments in the book where where he thinks he sees a historical he doesn't even think he sees. He knows he sees a historical figure, but in the present. Who's long passed away, but he sees them in the present, like the twin boys that look like Kafka to him, and then at the very end, the woman who looks like the daughter of King. I can't remember. That kind of like, yeah, he's in this like weird, hyper aware, but very delicate neurosis in which he's seeing these characters from the past in the actual present, totally convinced that they are these historical figures, and at the same time, they're not. Yeah, it's a very odd book to be so effective for me. It's a very odd. It's very odd that it is so that it works so well. But Connor says, kind of like Jess touched on with the Bob Dylan reference, it felt like an exposure of how unreliable memory can be, and also how memory can disturb the present moment. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And I also think that like there's something too with with history itself. I mean, he's obsessed not only with his own experiences, which I think we earned, and he earned the ability to dive into his past, revisiting the like village, the town that he lived in as a kid, and go through all those memories. He earned that. He earned that through the first, 4/5, 2/3 of the book, going through the Bale and the like in his life history, the Napoleonic kind of. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is like it's more too though than just memory, because I've read books that are supposed to be about this very same theme, memory, and it's the way it disintegrates, like the coat of that soldier that he finds in the attic, like memory that is. Yeah, I've read books and watched movies, and stories have been told about that, using that same theme, that are not even interesting in the slightest to me. And this has something more too that's happening with history itself, with time and the past, that I think too, like, not even Sebald could clearly define. And that's why this is a novel, because it can't exist fully in like exposition. It has to be in narrative, because these are like, it's like they're metaphors. The whole book is pointing at this very kind of subtle feeling and an idea and question that Sebald has. And I think that oh shoot, I lost my train of thought, but there's one aspect of the book that is really stunning to me that I'll have to remember, because I feel like we can't end the book club without diving into it. But it's out of my mind, and I'll find it again if I stop thinking about it. But Asa, his compulsion to document, like he really wanted evidence of those Kafka look-alike boys, but couldn't get it. Yes. Also, and like driving, this compulsion to document is driving him to do things that he's very uncomfortable with. The narrator is almost totally alone in all of his travels, and in these moments when he sees these figures that he believes are from the past, and yet he knows they're not, drive him to put himself in these uncomfortable situations. The parents of those boys think that he's has some sort of like sexual or pedophilic sort of like interest for these boys, which make him so ashamed, and like and then he has to share a bus ride with these parents. It's almost like hilariously it's like ironic that he's putting himself through these situations. Or when he's in Italy and returns back to the place, the pizza, outside of the pizza place across the street from it, and wants to get a photo of it, and the bartender turns him down and is like ashamed that he's even asking the question, and he goes and finds a tourist, someone on a honeymoon, and pays them 10 euro or whatever to take a photo and then send it to his address in England. He's like, he has this compulsion, is right, Asa, that he has this compulsion to document these things that have this resonance, from the past. Jess says on page 86, wishing someone seemingly from the past would appear in the train station, a representative of this bygone hierarchy. Yeah, exactly. I find there's something about this resonance that is what I was trying to get at about the book that maybe is kind of slipping my mind. But the resonance of the past is also a part of the theme, and how memory, and I'm kind of trying to like summon this thought I had. I guess too, like I was really struck by one kind of throwaway sentence in the book. Let me find it while the tea is boiling. So there's the sentence I was trying to find that one of the characters that the narrator is talking to said that history has already come to an end. It's not addressed any further. We don't get to have an explanation of why he thinks that or how he thinks that, but you get the sense through his writing that that's what Sebald absolutely believes, is that history has come to a close, and that the present moment is at the end of history, and he is trying to summon and I don't know. That is a huge part of the book to me, and why it feels so. Why Sebald and the narrator and his narrator have this compulsion to make living the past is because I feel like he believes that history is come to a close, and he, in the present, what is this like? He's writing from, I'm assuming, present was like early mid 90s. That that history is over. And so there's this compulsion. That is what drives, that's what his like fanatical kind of, feverish, um, his feverish kind of um, compulsion to document where it comes from is that history has ended. Um, Asa says, yes, that line is insane. Jess says, I highlighted that as well. Page 133, let's find it. And then I also have one more kind of note here that I want to bring up too. But oh yeah, wow. Ooh, it does give me goosebumps. Oh yes, so this is the Salvatore who's kind of gone on this monologue that Sebald is just recounting. Um, Did you know, Salvatore continued, that the sets and costumes for the Aida being performed in the arena today are exact replicas? Again, this is the theme of the book. This exact replica, this reproducing, this like conjuring, and anyway, that the sets and costumes for the Aida being performed in the arena today are exact replicas of those designed by Ettore Fagioli and Auguste Mariette for the inauguration of the festival in 1913. One might suppose no time had passed at all, though in fact history is now nearing its close. Yeah, whoa. It's not even Sebald saying it, not even his narrator thinking or saying it. It's another character in this kind of throwaway line almost that's given no more credence, not examined any further. For that reason, makes it so, I'm talking about why that line is so interesting is because I feel like it informs the whole present moment of the book where the narrator is narrating from. And it has this lightness and this kind of this scarce thing that you can't grab that I feel like Sebald does so well and could be like easily overlooked in the book, is that he's like, all of these things are so, they're, forgive me for the like, it's analogy, but like they're like the coat sleeve on the soldier that he goes up to see in the attic that's preserved, and he touches and like just disintegrates. I mean, it's just this very, very, very light quality in which this thing is being narrated from, this story, this narrative is being told from, so that this line, which has so much bearing and impact on the why of the book, is just, it's there and it's gone, and we're not it's just remarkable to me that something of so much importance can be can be laid out so briefly, and it has such an impact, and no more attention needs to be drawn to it. As readers, we just know and we just feel, oh my God, this line speaks to this, to what is driving the whole book. That to me is the sign of like total mastery, and that nothing else has to be, no more attention has to be drawn towards such an informing line. But almost all of us were like, oh yeah, we felt that line perfectly. This book is 260 pages, and we all have different experiences reading it. But one sentence on page 133 has such a striking quality to it that we all noticed it, wrote it down. Just beautiful to me that history, one more time, One might suppose no time had passed at all, though in fact history is now nearing its close. Though in fact history is now nearing its close. You know, in fact, it's undeniable. It's not a point. It's not even um, an opinion. It's not an opinion of Salvatore. It is just in fact history is now nearing its close. Um, okay, for fun, if anyone has any other passages that they really thought, I think in the end, uh, as we kind of near a full hour of book club, I think why Vertigo and Sebald is such uh, a powerful book, why he's such an interesting writer, why it feels, why he feels um, uh, so good and so. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. So good or so unusual or atypical that he can't be um, copied or emulated. Um, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, yeah. So I guess if you have any more, I have all of these, page marks and folds and underlined and things in the book that just kind of struck me. If you have any like little passages that you want to share, please do, because I think I now caught my train of thought again. Like my desire for all of us to like pin down his theme and describe it and unpack it and understand it. Not that it can't be done. I'm not saying that, but like it's kind of besides the point. And why he is such an inimitable writer is because his theme, you can't describe it, you can't hold it, you can't. It's got this light and disintegrating quality. The moment you try to really explain it and look at it, it disappears, it vanishes. It's too, which is so good, It's he's got this secret that you can't, you never quite get. It's almost like a mystery, in that sense. Um, Page 212 about history being absurd. Ooh, I too noticed that section. Noticed that that phrase, and it struck me too. I have that same thing underlined. Okay, so is this with what's his name, Lucas? Yeah, Lucas, who's the only kind of like living character who has a same, even cursory connection to the same past that our narrator does throughout the whole book. We get Lucas, which is why I think that the last chapter or the last section of the book was so interesting to me, because Lucas was there and could kind of, there was now finally another person to inform the memories and the history inside the book, inside the narrator. But let's see. Lucas, he particularly agreed when I said that over the years I had puzzled out a good deal in my own mind, but in spite of that, far from becoming clearer, things now appeared to be more incomprehensible than ever. The more images I gathered from the past, I said, the more unlikely it seemed to me that the past had actually happened in this or that way, for nothing about it could be called normal. Most of it was absurd, and if not absurd, then appalling. Yeah. Ugh. Uh, let's see. Oh yeah, Jess highlighted that same that same sentence. It's so good. I'm stunned by um, Sebald's ability to like have these brief moments that have such a resonance throughout the book and bring no more attention to them than any other sentence in the book, and yet they're so significant because we all want to know. That's what drives the reading forward in my experience, is that we all want to know what the hell he's getting at, not because it's like he's obfuscating or being playing coy and keeping something from us, because he also wants to know what he's getting at. And the whole book is one approach after the other to get closer to this question and this idea. And it's something that can't be truly held, but we all are so fascinated by it that when we get a sentence like this that gets closer at describing the theme, this idea, this question, God, it just rings, it echoes, and it echoes in the immediate read, and it echoes and informs everything that's come up to and will come after that point. I think that's why Sebald works as a writer. These books work as books, is because there's this thing that he wants to express so deeply that is ineffable and requires all these pages to express. And we too want to feel it expressed. We want to understand it, and we never can fully, but we get closer and closer. And certainly the feeling of this theme and of this narrator's experience, we experience that feeling. And maybe I'll close with, or we can start to close with, something that I experience every time. So like on the 4th of July, I happened to be with some, close family and whatever. I'm not going to share too many personal details, as is my MO on this channel. But all these old photographs, we were looking at all these photographs from the 70s, and one of the older people in the room was looking at these photographs of herself when she was 25, 30. And now she's 77 and has a lot of physical difficulties, mental difficulties, is definitely at the end of her life, the last chapter of her life. And she was looking at all these photos, and there's this weird, like, bittersweet nostalgia, especially as someone who's younger, that I feel for this person, and that her life has passed by in an instant. And here are these these photographs, these memories, preserved so perfectly, of an entirely different person who is her. I don't know. There's a feeling that I get when I look at photos with or of someone who is either past or is very old now, of when they're, of when they were young or at some other point in their life, which was so real to them when they were when the person who I was looking at these photos with, who's now 77, was looking at these photos of herself when she was 25. If we can go back to that moment when she was 25 in which that photo was taken, she was so convinced of herself and her life as it was unfolding, as if it was almost impossible that 52 years could have passed and she could end up this completely different person who's incapacitated in all these different ways, you know, at the end of her life. God, there's just a feeling. There's a feeling that has, you know, we're all bound to this lifespan, this timeline, and something about the past, our memories, the, like Asa said, the like documentation, the compulsion to document. I don't know. Yeah, there's something. This is different, of course, a little bit. Differs a little bit from what Sebald is getting at, but there's a familiar feeling when I look at these old photos with someone of their life. You know, um, their bygone life. It just, I don't know. It's striking and scary and poignant and indescribable, ineffable. Blah, I don't know. I keep talking, but that feeling I get, that feeling I had a few days ago looking at those photos is feels similar to Sebald and what he's feeling and why these books hit on so many levels. They're not intellectual exercises, and they aren't essays in that way. They are like deeply fictional. They are novels through and through, which is why I feel like Sebald kind of does invent his own genre, because there's so much feeling behind these books, and he gets to that feeling in this very precise non-fictional way, this essayistic kind of way. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I'm stunned by Vertigo. When I was reading Sebald, maybe a year and a half ago, I felt almost like, well, not even almost. He was like an enemy of sorts, because he was such a, he was so, God, you know, his prose is so precise and journalistic, and I just felt like, oh, how the fuck does he do it? He was just force in my writing life for the negative, because I felt like, I don't know. But anyway, as I spend more time with, you know, Sebald, whom I had deemed as my enemy, I just feel, yeah, more and more like, I don't know. He was very exceptional, and I feel like I could read, you know, the 4 or 5 books that he has put out over and over again in my life, you know, years after each other, and get more from them each time. Um, and so I look forward to that. I look forward to reading Vertigo again and Austerlitz again. I've been thinking about that book constantly since I finished it and since reading Vertigo. The Immigrants, which I can't find in my pile, but I know I have that book. Really looking forward to reading that one again. But I think that's it. I think that's all I can say. And yeah, I feel like I wasn't the best host this time around. I'm sorry. I'll take more notes next time, and maybe have more pointed questions that I can ask everybody. But yeah, if anyone has something to say in closing, another part of the book that they feel like, something about the book they feel like is kind of burning in them that they really want to say, I would really feel grateful if you commented it. And yeah, I think I'll just read off the comments. Jess is now working at a bookstore. Let's go. Congrats. Sounds really fun, and I hope it's good. Also, I'm so glad he's no longer an enemy. Yeah, me too. Me too. He's still an enemy in some ways, but like I just yeah, we have this interesting relationship. Um, just read The Immigrants, although just like the Vertigo more. And then thanks again for hosting this book club. I know it's a big monthly highlight for me and Connor. Yeah, it's a highlight for me. Honestly, it's one of the best parts of this channel, um, of having this channel in any way, which I upkeep very inconsistently and then at times very, very passionately. I feel like the inconsistency kind of sustains this channel. If I was trying to do something once a week, which I've done at times, I feel like I would burn out, you know. But oh yeah, okay. Next month's pick. That's what I love. Peter Handke, and I would love to read some of his books. But also, I don't really have. Some months I'm like, I know exactly what we're reading, or I know exactly who we're reading. Um, but this month I don't. I feel like I would like to read Peter Handke, um, but I'm also open. I may just open up like a post on the channel, and if anyone, I'll just let people kind of um, throw out their recommendations for next month, and then we'll see what sticks, what we like, or we could read something from Peter Handke, and do that. Um, So, if anyone has any thoughts on next month's pick, definitely, if there's something you want to read, something you're burning to read that you feel like kind of fits what we're interested in the book club, throw it out there. If not, I'll kind of post a larger um, request um, on the channel, and we'll see what we get. And yeah, I think that's going to be it. If anyone has anything, again, that's like burning to say about the book or about Sebald or about anything, um, definitely feel free to comment it. And yeah, I just really appreciate Jess and Connor, Asa, and um, Knack, who was here for a while, and Nixie. Um, Asa, personally, I would be thrilled to continue the vein of like hard to define fiction. Awesome. Let's do it. I think let's read Peter Handke, because to me, he is in that vein in a much different way. I feel like he's much more driven by story. Um, but yeah, he is off in his own world. Um, and maybe I'll try to think of a few others who have this. I mean, we're kind of running. It's a very small pool, and we're kind of running low on these authors who approach fiction in this way. And but I agree, Asa. I think that's what the book club has been for the past 5 or 6 months, or however long. Um, so let's keep going on that. I'll find some more examples, some books that I think could. Ah, man, I kind of want to read The Afternoon of a Writer by Peter Handke, which is one of my favorite books. Or maybe we could read Max Frisch, Man in the Holocene, which may be my like all-time favorite book, and I'm obsessed with it. So anyway, all that's to say, um, I'll put a few books up to vote on in the post of the channel, and other than that, thanks everyone for hanging out. I really appreciate you. This is the best thing that happens on this channel, and I feel really grateful that everyone, um, yeah, likes to read and join in. And I'll see y'all soon. Let's do it again next month. Um, thanks. Have a good day, and goodbye.